Absolutely. Bureaucracy is integral to technocracy. Vast compartmentalization, very much integral to the concept of technocracy, because essentially through compartmentalization, you have a way of diffusing power enough so as to basically nullify any grassroots efforts to dethrone the technocratic elite.
We see they do know about inertia, the concept, and they know if they put enough ballast, of bureaucratic ballast, that should stop any kind of uprisings of truth that might come against
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a bitter pill for me to swallow. I have to explain to you, because I have been one to be a proponent for particularly young Christians getting involved in the sciences. I did not go into biological sciences, so I didn't have the issues to face with professors about evolution and about some of these other issues. The engineering field is relatively straightforward. In fact, I even found nestled in some thermodynamics text and engineering some admission that things like the second laws of thermodynamics are basically concessions about a creator in the universe.
Right.
Really?
Tucked in some secular textbooks at a secular university. But I have tried to encourage more young people to go into these fields simply because there are people who are not being reached within technical environments in other similar professions that are not hearing the gospel, and they need to be reached by people. And I find a lot of our Christian universities are just simply choosing not to offer subject areas. There's only maybe 2, at most 3 Christian universities in the country I know that even offer an engineering program.
Really?
And it's almost like they've thrown their hands up and said there's no way we can reach these people. But what it sounds like to me is they need to get in the middle of the fray and fight these things out. What you explained here is not just an abstract philosophical concept. I see it working regularly, and any other scientist-type person would agree with me on this. When it comes to the point of trying to get government grants or other kind of grant money, you find somewhat there's technical principles that are used to evaluate ideas, concepts, and proposals, but political correctness, even within the technical community, always trumps other factors and considerations in being able to get money for universities or for other researchers to do work. And they always have a cause du jour that's been politically approved by those above, and then the scientists will factor rationale after the fact to justify that. So that's how I see your premise actually working today, even within investments that are made within the research community.
Absolutely. And just a little disclaimer, by scientism, I'm not referring to legitimate science, which has a place in the study of natural phenomena. I am basically dissuading people from the fetishization of science, and just understanding that science has its own proper place within a hierarchy of knowledge, and that science in and of itself cannot represent the sum totality of reality. Science deals with quantifiable entities, deals with what is empirically verifiable, but because science cannot deal with suprasensible entities, cannot deal with considerations that are outside empirical analysis, science cannot be considered the ultimate and only measuring stick for defining reality. And that's what those of the scientistic paradigm do. They basically believe that science is the universal expositor of truth, and as such can be just used in questions of ethics, of morality, and of governance and the political science. And as a result, that's where we have the majority of totalitarian regimes of the 20th century coming from today. The Marxist variety of socialism was referred to by Frederick Engels as scientific socialism, mainly because it was based on the scientific premises of empiricism, which is the epistemological position that all knowledge is derived exclusively from the senses, and thus while all suprasensible phenomena and suprasensible entities were completely precluded from Marxism, namely God, namely the human spirit, and dignity and liberty. All these things that were not quantifiable entities were completely precluded, and that's the pitfall of scientism. And scientism basically reduces man to nothing more than a soulless meat machine.
Well, it also reduces their capability to be good scientists. Some of the most famous scientists that have contributed most to their field had a relationship with God. I'm thinking about Newton, Blaise Pascal, a number of other famous people. Most of those
them wrote a lot about God.
Most of those gentlemen, their primary pursuit was the pursuit of the nature of God. And as a subset of that, they looked into science to find further elaborations to help their understanding of who God was. And that's the proper relationship of things, and that's what's been cut off. And what's interesting, an example you give with the Soviet Union, is by divorcing themselves of the revelatory opportunities through a relationship with a creator God, that limited their capability to benefit and bless their own people. That cut off the capability for God's blessing to even work within their own brilliant people, and the Russian people are just brilliant, but they were severely handicapped when they were given or taken away that the spiritual component of their lives to be able to see that illumination from God.
But if you'll notice, it also made it quite easy for individuals like Joseph Stalin and V.I. Lenin to become, within their own little world, gods unto themselves. That's why it comes, again, this all goes back to the Enlightenment tradition, which in turn comes out of Gnostic thinking. The idea is the enthronement of man, the apotheosis of man, basically to divorce man from the Creator so that man becomes his own God. And that's essentially what atheism is. Atheism is not so much the rejection of God as it is a segue, a philosophical segue for the supplanting of God by man. Because as Malcolm Muggeridge himself, who used to be an atheist, said, when you get rid of God, somebody has to take his place. And invariably, who is that? Invariably, it's man himself.
It's interesting, though, that you point out that that it actually led to a retardation of progress.
Right.
When it in the Soviet Union, when it was supposed to be. When it was supposed to bring about progress, that there was supposed. Yeah, that's the nobody understood and appreciated this more than the power elite here in the United States, and that's why we see several leading lights within the power elite actually funding the Bolsheviks. Primary amongst those funding the Bolsheviks was none other than Rockefeller, because he knew that it would retard technological and scientific progress over in Russia. It would retard industrial progress, and that's what he wanted at the time, because the Tsar was a very repressive ruler, and nobody's going to argue that here. But the truth of the matter is that he was heading them in a direction where they were about to be on par with the United States, and thus on par with the Western faction of the elite. When the Bolsheviks came to power, all those oil fields just sat idle. They were neglected all of a sudden, and half of those oil wells weren't even touched, and industry slowed to a crawl until Rockefeller and some of his capitalist friends could actually get in there.
Yeah, Arm and Hammer. Yeah. So he knew how to hamstring them basically for his own purposes.
Right.
Well, I find what's interesting is that when we see their documents in hindsight in the last days of the Soviet Union, they were able to basically grudgingly admit their shortcomings, because then they started investing in all sorts of bizarre spiritual things like psychics and other kind of things that we find where they almost admitted the failure of their whole system, in that they did that route, but it was in a real Mickey Mouse fashion. Rather than looking on revealed truth, developed over millennia between God and man, they start doing these kind of things. We need to wrap up. We're coming up to the end, and I'm afraid our listeners are going to be left with a cliffhanger, because I wanted to promise them that we were going to start talking about some specific names and movements today with this, but there's just simply too much material here.
We're going to have to keep that for a different show, I think.
And I want to know if you would be willing to come back later this summer and take on part 2 of our discussion.
Yeah, this is
Sure,
this is too good to leave to one discussion.
Well, I've decided that I would rather you give these kind of subjects the treatment they deserve, rather than trying to rush them through and say we completed something. So if you don't mind, I'd like to have you back. But you're bringing your discussion of scientism and technocracy obviously must touch on the book that you have written called The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. In about a minute, could you just give us a quick understanding of the premise and where our listeners can get that book and find your other writings?
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, the overall premise of the ascendancy of the scientific dictatorship is that the older theocratic power structures of antiquity, namely those in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago, and Babylon and Egypt, found a source of continuity in the technocratic forms of governance in the 20th century and going into the 21st century with communism, with fascism, and now with the synthesis of all forms of socialism and capitalism in the West and what we see in the emergent New World Order today. People who are interested in picking up a copy can do so just by visiting Amazon.com. You want the 2006 Book Surge edition. You do not want the 2003 iUniverse edition, because the 2006 Book Surge edition is the one with the most updated and extensive information.
Okay. And I'm certainly a breezy read they can probably get through in an afternoon.
Yeah.
I challenge anyone to get
Danielle
through
Steele book or something.
to get through one of your articles in more than a week. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, you guys were great.
We'd like to have you back regularly. I think this is a gang of four that really works here.
Yeah.
I agree.
Much more than for the Chinese. Our audience, they had their gang of four. It didn't turn out so well. So we'd love to have you back again. Times are a-changing. We've got big things happening all around us, and you two are just the kind of guys that can all put it in proper perspective for us and help educate us on a background and explain what we're seeing right now. I know our listeners appreciate you and what you're doing. I wholeheartedly encourage everyone to get your book, but we're going to have to say goodbye to now. But I just want to thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to hold you on your word to come back here again in another
you guys are on the hook
another
now.
month or two, okay?
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll definitely do it. We'll have to talk about the CMP next time and start naming some names, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I'm gonna wear out a hole in the carpet here, pacing back and forth. Wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen, you're in for a treat. I didn't mean to leave it to cliffhanger, but this is some essential education that the Collins brothers are giving us here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back again very, very soon.
Outstanding. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you again. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.